What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here. I'm the host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, host and producer. Do you know what time it is? And co-host and producer of weekly podcasts for a initiative for the President's Council, White House Council for Men and Boys. And but I'm not doing that tonight. I'm catching up with my boy, Brenden, and we haven't been on for a while on the Sports Vibe. And I mean, from the time we were supposed to be last on, we can't even talk about that stuff now because there's been so much stuff on after that about sports. Like even right now, we're broadcasting live. It's about 5 minutes after 7 on March 15th, and the March Madness brackets of the NCAA have just been announced. We could spend hours just on that, and but we're going to spend some time on that. Hopefully we could get to the NFL and what's been going on, and there's stuff even going on as we speak with the NFL. But first of all, Brenden, good to have you back. How you been, man?
I've been great. This is such a great time in sports. This is one of my favorite times. I'm a North Carolina kid, so you know how seriously we take college basketball. Just to give you a quick story, we used to during this time when I was in grade school, we used to actually they would stop teaching and they would just turn the games on
Come on.
during the class. Dead serious. Like I try to explain this to people who aren't from North Carolina how seriously we take college basketball.
I know. I feel you, man. I can understand. It's Tar Heel blue, but my condolences on your team losing last night.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm all right. It was a little, I got my Carolinas blue. I got to rep the set. But I was really all right. 4 games in 4 days. I think it just caught up with them after a while. They fell to Notre Dame late in that game. They kind of had control of it for a large percentage of that game. Played pretty well, especially in the second half. Knocked down a lot of 3-pointers, which is something that the team has struggled with, producing points from behind the 3-point arc. But they looked pretty good. I think just eventually. They just ran out of steam. I mean, 4 games in 4 days. I know these guys are 20 years old, but that'll wear on anybody. I like what I saw from them, especially in that UVA game. Virginia's a legitimate team. They can make anybody look really, really pedestrian. They're a really great defensive team, and they're no mistakes team, right? They're one of those teams that low turnovers, low possessions, grind it out. And while they don't have that one guy that you point at and look at and like, oh, yeah, he's absolutely the guy that you want to stop. He's absolutely the guy that you're frightful of. They play so well as a team, and they have such an identity starting from their coach Bennett and working its way down. And now that they're going to get Anderson back, while they may have lost the number 1 seed, because I think having Anderson and having him be hurt with first the hand injury and then the appendectomy, I think they're going to be fine moving forward.
Well, you know what? Well, let's get right into March Madness, and I'm taking a look at the bracket here, and I think out of all the number 1 seeds outside of Kentucky, which is the overall number 1 seed, which out of Villanova, Duke, and Wisconsin, which do you feel has the toughest bracket? Which number 1 seed has the toughest bracket?
Okay, I'm actually bringing up the brackets now because this was all coming together like right as we were coming on. Give me 1 second. I've got it right in front of me.
I got some takes here myself. I think that, but you know, one of the things I think there's a lot of good teams, but there isn't a great team, and I know that Kentucky is a great team, but they can be beat.
Well, yeah. So that's the really, really interesting thing about this Kentucky team, because as good as it is, and they're undefeated, and something that they're bidding to do something that an Indiana team back in the late 70s, early 80s has done. I think that a lot of people think that the first incarnation of the Calipari Kentucky team that won the NCAA tournament, I think a lot of people think that their team was better. I think that their top-tier talent was certainly better, and their starting 5 was better. I think that this team, however, is so crazy deep. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things, the fact that they're able to legitimately bring in 5 guys all the time that would be starting on other people's teams. You got 10 guys that are legitimate players, and they wear you down, man. Like, yeah, they're talented, and yeah, you got some guys. Karl Anthony Thomas, the way he's come on late in this season, people are starting to question whether or not Jahlil Okafor for Duke is really going to be your number 1 pick. He's been Karl Thomas has been that good and it has improved that much since the beginning of the season. But as good as he is, I think it's just their complete depth and their ability. No was concerned about their numbers. As much as people talk about freshmen or young players, especially this generation of players, whatever that means, being so concerned with the next level and getting their numbers so that they can get the money and go to the NBA, Calipari seems to be able to talk to them and say, look, it really doesn't matter about what the numbers you put up during the regular season. If you win, that is the best advertisement for you, for yourself, for this team, for this university, and moving forward. Someone asked him a question, and they say, you know, how excited will you be? And they gave the date of the, you know, of the championship game, April 11th or whatever it is. He said, how excited will you be during the last day of the season? He's like, my last day of the season isn't until the NBA draft.
Exactly.
That's his last day of the season. Because that's what he does, right? You see him every single year. He's sitting in that green room with 2, 3, 4 guys waiting to get called for the lottery. That's his biggest advertisement. He doesn't have to recruit at all. Like, he can just sit up there and just wait for someone to call him, because that is how he's been able to indoctrinate this team. He's gotten a certain culture with all of his teams that it's team first, and by putting the team first, you really put yourself first, and you put yourself in a situation where you can be the number 1 pick, and he's got a couple guys that are absolute lottery picks.
You mentioned Okafor. I don't know if he's going to be number 1 pick. I think he's got, from what I've seen, at least one glaring weakness in his game: the foul shooting. And it's interesting because I think when I saw some of the highlights from the Notre Dame game against Duke, their philosophy was, we're going to let Okafor have a great game, and we're going to hack him to the foul line, but our key thing was to stop Duke from the three-point area.
Well, yeah, we've seen this before, right? We see the big man who can't shoot, and, you know, hack a Shaq. I mean, that's where it comes from. I think that he's going to be okay. He seems comfortable in his jump shot out to about 12, 13 feet. I think that eventually he'll improve on his free throw. You don't see that a ton from big guys, but you look at a guy like Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan used to be a horrific free throw shooter, like 48, 52, really poor shooter, and he just worked on it. Like, he just became a better shooter. He always had a decent stroke, but free throw shooting is as much about confidence and routine as it is about your form and your free throw shooting, as it is about your form and accuracy. So I think eventually you'll see that. Now, his defense, honestly, to me, is probably the biggest concern. He's not a great athlete. We talked about Kentucky. He's not a Willie Cauley-Stein. You look at him and you see kind of a Tyson Chandler type of role where, you know, he's not a great offensive player, but he's so athletic and he's so active that he's able to get and contest. He's able to show out on those, what the NBA is now, right? You'll see the little man, and you'll see their corresponding big. It will run a high pick and roll, and they'll make the opposition's big go out and show on the perimeter, and then get back and recover to defend the basket. Jahlil Okafor doesn't seem to have the foot speed to do that. He's also been exposed occasionally with either smaller than him, with he's very comfortable defending. Now, part of this is very, very thin. They've only got 8 scholarship players, and there's not a lot of, besides Plumlee behind him, there's not a lot of talent behind him to play. So he can't be overly aggressive on defense. Right. So I think, you know, the free throw shooting, I think he'll get better. Defensively, I don't know. Honestly, the biggest comparison, or the best comparison that I've seen, there's been some talk about KG because he's able to handle the ball. Some talk about Tim Duncan and the way and how comfortable he is in the post. He reminds me more of Al Jefferson because he is more of a mediocre athlete, but a strong guy, and a little bit pedestrian on defense. He reminds me more of an Al Jefferson and a guy that you can dump the ball down to and just let him work and let him move on that block.
Okay. I've got a chance to look at the brackets.
I really like, I'm pulling it up right now. I'm sorry about this.
No problem.
I'm pulling it up now. I really like, look, it's hard to go against Kentucky. They don't have anything that you look at and it's glaring. They do have a team that I really, really like, is in terms of one of those sleeper, annoying teams that could maybe trip somebody up. I don't think they'll get all the way to Kentucky. But Butler beat UNC earlier this year, and the way that they did that, they ran a lot of Princeton-style offense. They got guys 1 through 5 that can knock down the three-pointer. It's more of a, I hate to say gimmick because that sounds like I'm degrading what they do on offense, but they do have a certain philosophy that makes it tough for certain teams. So, like, watching Kentucky with all their bigs, with all their size, we've heard so much about, Kentucky's as big as some NBA teams, bigger than most NBA teams. Well, the way to combat that is to start bringing guys out and making them uncomfortable. So bringing the Carl Anthony Thomas out, bringing a Willie Cauley-Stein out. So that'll be very, very interesting. You also have Wisconsin, who's, to me, I like Wisconsin. They struggle to score occasionally because they don't have terrific guard play. Everybody knows Decker. Everyone knows Kaminsky. Two really, really good forwards and centers that they bring out. So a team that could upset a Kentucky because of their ability to have so many people to shoot the three. But guard play rules in the NCAA tournament, and we've seen their coach have some success, have multiple success in the NCAA tournament, but never be able to get to the big game, never be able to make the bigger transition. So if I'm going to go with one number one team that I'm the most hesitant about going further, and really we're talking about making the Final Four, right? That's kind of, if you're a number one seed, the Final Four is something that you're quote unquote supposed to get to because you're the best in that bracket. If I have my most misgivings are about Wisconsin, especially because they have Arizona as their number two. Arizona could have very easily been their number one.
I'm looking at that side of the bracket. That is the tougher side, man, because even with Kentucky, look at the teams in there. There's Kansas, there's Butler, there's Notre Dame. That
yes.
Like whoever gets to play Kentucky, if Kentucky gets, it's a battle to get to who's going to play, if they're going to have anything left.
Yeah, so this is a war of attrition, right? Like, this is a really long process. Not okay. So you've finally gotten to the NCAA tournament. Congratulations. For Kentucky especially, now the pressure's on, right? Because everybody thought it was a foregone conclusion. Once they got to around February and were still undefeated, most people thought that they were going to run the SEC, mostly because they're good and also because the SEC is a little lackluster this year. You don't have the classic Florida Billy Donovan team or some squad that's really, really strong. So pretty much everybody assumed that they were going to get to this position and were going to be undefeated, which is a little unfair, right? Because you've worked, you almost don't get the fulfillment of being undefeated at this point. That's a very rare quality most teams don't get. But you look at once they won the SEC tournament, what did Kentucky do? They refused to cut down the nets. Why? Because everyone knows that this is not about the SEC tournament. This is about the NCAA tournament and them going back and winning. There's so much pressure on these guys that it almost kind of takes time. It's almost unfair to them, I feel like, because it takes away some of the fun of getting to this point.
Well, and I'm just like I'm looking at it on my monitor here. I'm just looking at the left side, and it's going that the Midwest and the West is tough. I mean,
it's very, very tough. Even a team like Georgia State. I mean, like Georgia State is one of those teams that certain guys are looking for a Cinderella squad because they got a lot of transfers from larger programs and from mid-major programs. And suddenly, this Georgia State team that no one's been talking about, they got a high-octane offense. And then as a kind of a feel-good story, you remember Kevin Ware from Louisville? He had that he broke his leg, and it was very, very, very tough. Well, he's actually on that team, so that's a nice little fun story on top of everything else. This team could really do a little bit of damage because while it's a Georgia State program that hasn't had any sort of real history of winning, the transfers that they've gotten from some of those larger programs like a Louisville is going to make it very, very interesting because their talent isn't necessarily belied by the fact that it's Georgia State.
No, I'm just looking like in the West bracket. You got Wisconsin, you got Arkansas, you got UNC, you got Baylor, you got Arizona. That is just it's very, very interesting. I actually am looking at the East now, and I didn't realize that how many of those teams were teams that I was selecting to do something a little bit special. I like Michigan State a lot. They came on towards the end of the season, and Tom Izzo, to his credit, he got this team. He got this team ratcheted back up, and they kind of found themselves. And they started to play like one of those Tom Izzo Michigan State teams where they're really good at rebounding, running, hustling all over the floor. And they've got a lot of really good athletes at that 2 to 4 position with a shooting guard to power forward that can just give you trouble and give you mismatched nightmares. That's one of the teams. I know they're only a 7 seed, which is a low seed for a Michigan State squad, and they don't have great guard play. But this is one of those teams that those calming. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I'm just saying I never underestimate Tom Izzo, especially when it comes to March Madness.
You can't because see, I think that especially in college basketball, coaching is so important, right? Because you're with were 18, 19 years old. So this new, brand new to a lot of them. Even if you've been a big time player or whatever, what have you, Tom Izzo or Coach K or Roy Williams or any of these other big time coaches can let you navigate those minefields and say, you know what, don't worry about reading your press clippings. Don't worry about, being perfect. You don't have to be perfect. This is March Madness, okay? Everything, there are going to be crazy games. You're going to get great games by some seniors that aren't ready to go home. You're going to get some surprising games by some bench players who you just not listen to sing play this well. You're going to get some poor games from some star players because the stage is just too big for them. You're going to get all sorts of I've also often said that sports is the best reality TV. This is a prime example of it.
Absolutely. Just taking a quick look at the South region, you got Duke, UCLA, ISU, Iowa State. I haven't seen them play, and same thing with Gonzaga. Haven't seen them play, heard a lot about them, but I'm just having a feeling Duke will find a way of messing up. I'm not fully confident about this Duke team because, I love Coach K as a coach. I think he's fantastic, but I just don't like when teams have to live and die on the three-point shot. Reason why they lost against Notre Dame the other night.
Yeah, I mean, Duke is this is a more difficult Duke team to kind of feel because you pretty much got the starting five and then you have everybody else. This isn't a team that with a ton of guys on it. However, the starting five is really, really good. I don't know if anybody has a better starting five. Quinn Cook, we talked about experience and guard play. He's had a fantastic senior campaign. I mean, I've watched him his entire time at Duke, and he's never been as confident. He's never understood a team as well as he does this one. Whenever they need a basket, as talented as Tyus Jones is, as talented as Justice Winslow is, as talented as Okafor is, he's the guy that oftentimes knocks down that big-time three, and he's a calming presence for that whole squad. It's tough for me to think that they're going to go super far in this tournament because I'm a Carolina guy, tried and true UNC till I die. But this is a very, very good Duke team. I know Duke has been kind of the rich pick in terms of they're going to go out early because they've had some early losses in recent years. But I think that this team is pretty tightly compacted together. I think that this squad is going to be really, really good. But you mentioned both Iowa State and Gonzaga. An interesting dynamic there. Iowa State's in the Big 12, and I've seen Iowa State play a few times this year. The Big 12 is arguably the best conference in college basketball. So while they've had some losses, and people kind of wrote them off a little bit, and they've gotten down to some teams they really shouldn't have gotten down to, but they always have some sort of resiliency. That's just their thing. They're able to put up a whole bunch of points. They're able to play through a lot of different guys. They play through their power forward Niang as much as anybody that I've seen. They're able to do a lot of things and put up a lot of points. There's a lot of teams in here that like to slow the pace down in terms of trying to keep the score low. If you have a team that can put up buckets quickly, that'll keep them in a puncher's chance in any contest they have. And then you put that as a natural foil to Gonzaga. Gonzaga, as impressive as they are, last time I checked, they were top 3 in field goal percentage and assists, and they look very, very imposing on offense. But then you start taking a look at who they've played, and they only played 2 ranked teams throughout the season. And so you look at that and say, okay, how good are you, right? Like, that's kind of Gonzaga's thing every year. Like, yeah, you've run roughshod through your conference, but how good are you when you step up and you start playing the better teams on a more regular basis? I've often thought that your regular season was the best curriculum in terms of preparing you for the NCAA tournament, which I akin to the SAT. Like, yeah, you can have A's all throughout, but if you have never gone to the bigger schools, have never done what you needed to do at the larger arenas on the larger scale, then how good are you? Gonzaga still got that bit of stigmatism about them, and they're going to have to prove, even with their coach Mark Few, who's done a fantastic job building that program, they still got to prove a little something in terms of once you get into the upper echelon, are you really that good, or have you been beating smaller opponents?
Yeah, and it's true. And one of the things that first stands out to me when I look at the bracket, all the number 1 seeds are east of the Mississippi.
You know what? that's pick up for you. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just checking for the Pac-12 teams now. Actually, Arizona was probably the best out of that squad, and I think UCLA's up here. Yeah, not necessarily a huge West Coast field of this particular March Madness.
Yeah, it seems predominantly east of the Mississippi, really, really heavily based. Well, Do you want to give some Final Four picks right now?
Yes. Okay. All right, man. Obviously, this is really really early, but I'm going to go with Kentucky. I can't. I just can't see anybody beating them out of that Midwest region. Kansas has looked good in certain spots, and we all remember what happened when Kentucky and Kansas went head up earlier in the season. They got spanked by 20. But this is a different Kansas team. Cliff Alexander is playing much better. If Perry Ellis can stay healthy, they've got enough guns now that they can hang with Kentucky. But I still don't. It's hard for me to see them losing to any of those other teams. Maryland's been a nice surprise, a team that left the ACC, moved to the Big Ten, and is suddenly running roughshod over that conference. Which maybe that's saying something about how tough the ACC is. But no, the Maryland has really been a super surprise for me. But I still don't see, even with Maryland and even with Kansas, I still don't see anybody beating Kentucky in the West. I'm gonna be a complete homer, and I'm gonna pick UNC. I know I shouldn't, but the way they turned it on late in this season, they showed a lot of gumption, and they've always had the talent, right? UNC's problem was never that they didn't have talent, is that they couldn't seem to put it together for any extended period of time. You've got two low post players in Kennedy Meeks and Bryce Johnson, who are legitimate players, and most teams don't have one guy that they can throw it to in the low post, much less two. Marcus Page, look, he's ankles and his plantar fasciitis, but he's looked more aggressive and healthier later in this season than he ever has before. And I'll keep a lookout for two different guys on that UNC team, Isaiah Hicks and Justin Jackson. Both those guys look so much better and have matured in their games and just the way they carry themselves so much from the beginning of the season. Isaiah Hicks is a returning player. He's a sophomore, and they had him at the 3 position last season. It just wasn't for him. He felt it was just uncomfortable, and you could notice it every time he tried to handle the ball on the perimeter. The reason that they felt comfortable putting him at the 3 at all was because he's able to handle the ball. He's able to face up and do some things, a couple of dribbles, and get to his shot. They moved him to the 4, and he looks so much more comfortable, so much better, and he's a better athlete than I think I gave him credit for. And Justin Jackson reminds me so much of Christopher Douglas Roberts, just a young guy who can play off the ball and just understands his role in the offense. So I'm going to go with UNC and be a complete homer. On the south side, man, it's hard not to pick Duke. I don't want to pick all chalk, but it's hard not to pick Duke. Duke and Gonzaga, I think, are going to go 1-2 in that southern region. And if Duke has enough left in the tank, because like I said, they're a thin team this year. If Duke has enough left in the tank, I like them over Gonzaga. As in terms of the East, man, that's a whole bunch of teams that I thought were going to be. That's a whole bunch of teams I thought were going to be scattered around, and I'd be able to pick them for smaller upsets. And the committee seemed to put all of them in one bracket.
That is another tough bracket. UVA and Louisville. Woo!
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good stuff. And
Michigan State. Woo! And
and don't discount Oklahoma either. Oklahoma has had some tough losses this year, but Oklahoma is really, really good. Speaking of teams that can turn it up, Iowa State and Oklahoma had one of the more fun games this season. They put on a barn burner earlier. I think that was in Norman, Oklahoma. If I'm going to go with one team, man, give me Michigan State. I'm going to go ahead and trust it.
I knew you were going to go there. I knew you were going to go there. I knew you were going to go there.
It's tough to bet against Izzo, man. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows what this whole game is about. And they have so many good athletes and so much just raw toughness. This team didn't start off looking like an Izzo team. They were giving up off and the kind of expect squad. You really saw the turn. You really saw the beat up on a lot of lesser teams and hang in there with some better teams. So Michigan State out of a whole bracket that's going to be really, really tough to call. I think that bracket, the East bracket, will probably be the most fun to watch in terms of game.
Well, hopefully we'll be back on within the week or so to see how everything shakes down, and I'm sure we'll be back on within a week or two to catch everything and see how the predictions are going. But
let me give one shout out real quickly. I gotta give one shout out to Hampton University, the MEAC. I'm a Howard guy, so it pays me to give love to Hampton. But they upset Delaware State, who upset Central. Hampton's the only team with a losing record in this, and they're I think that are they in the playing game? I think they're in one of the playing games. No, they're yeah, they're in the playoff playing game, so they'll be playing Kentucky if they beat Manhattan. But I had to give them a shout out. I appreciate them being able to fight through, and that's what we love about NCAA, right? Like if it were going through and just looking at the regular season, Central would be coming out of the MEAC, and they would be the lone representative. It's one and done, right? So it's win or go home every single time you step out on the court, and that's the thing that we love so much about this college basketball. So big ups to the Pirates.
Hey, have you ever been to a March Madness game?
I have. I actually they had the championship in New Orleans while I was down there, and I got a chance to see Kansas and Kentucky get loose, and that was a lot of fun. Like that was that Kentucky team that won. They had Anthony Davis and Terrence Jones and just everybody else on that squad. And Thomas Robinson from Kansas did everything he could, but just that team was overpowering. Like you could just tell, like, man, there's just so many pros on this floor. I enjoy watching them play.
All right, let's do a little shift. NFL, and we won't be able to cover everything that we want to, but we're just gonna go at it wherever. Sam Bradford traded from St. Louis to Philadelphia for Nick Foles. Talk to me. What do you think? I think in a way it's a good trade because I think Sam Bradford, though the only thing, the injuries.
Right. And Kelly, not really 100% sure what they're doing. I mean, outside of that whoever's in that building, outside of them, no one really has an idea of what they're doing, right? Because Nick Foles, while he did get hurt this past season, had put up pretty good numbers in that system, and it looked like, or at least to me, I thought that because they weren't going after Mariota, that they had their guy in Nick Foles. And then they transitioned and pulled the trigger on this trade, which I didn't hear any rumblings about, and trade for a guy who spent the last 2 seasons on the IR. It's surprising, especially when you start considering that if he starts a certain amount of games, they're going to also give up a second-round pick in 2016, which is the first 3 rounds are pretty much guaranteed starters for your team. So you really have to believe in Sam Bradford. Now, I've been reading some reports lately in the past 3 to 4 hours talking about Sam Bradford might be used as a piece in order to move up for Mariota. There's still that in the background. There's still that background noise of what exactly are they doing in Philadelphia? Is there a bigger plan in motion? But Chip Kelly's pretty much always believed this, that he told a lot of the guys, even when he was back at Oregon, that if he ever got a chance in the NFL, he wouldn't spend his money on the offensive end. He'd spend on the defensive end, mostly because he trusts his offensive system so much that he feels there's a lot of plug and play. Like he doesn't have to spend a total crazy amount of money on offense because he can take a mediocre, average and they'll be successful, which is why they were which is why they traded Deshaun Jackson, which is why LaShawn McCoy is no longer there. The 3 largest stars on that team really are no longer there at the skill positions, and those guys are arguably some of the best guys at their position. Deshaun Jackson is one of the most explosive athletes we've seen at the wide receiver position in a long time, and LaShawn McCoy is the closest thing I've ever seen to Barry Sanders. So for you to feel willing and able to move forward and just kind of let those guys walk out the door, it shows a lot of confidence or maybe naivete in your system. So Chip Kelly's definitely put the bullseye right on him. He's the face of the franchise now. You can't say that for a lot of coaches in the NFL. So everybody in Philly's going to be watching, and you kind of have to deliver this season.
Well, not only that, but I think with the offensive stuff that Philadelphia has, the conference that the division that they're in doesn't have the greatest of defenses. Dallas doesn't have a great defense. The Giants don't really have a good defense. Washington, who knows what's going on with Washington? Rumor has it that they may even drop Mariota, which is a whole other story in itself. I think instead of Jameis Winston being the most interesting person to drop, I think it's gone to Mariota and where he's going to be going.
Absolutely. That's the coolest thing about the NFL. You usually don't get this type of NFL hot stove action. Like you mentioned Nick Foles for Sam Bradford. Starting quarterbacks almost never get traded for one another in the NFL because they're considered kind of the cornerstone of their franchise. And so if you move on from an NFL quarterback, the thinking is that he's just going to go be a backup somewhere else. Now a straight up trade for one starting quarterback for the other, that's a very rare thing. A lot of these hot stove NFL sort of things are new. You look at Patrick Willis. He retired as long as World Locker, and you're starting to see like retirement. the prime of your career, Patrick Willis is on the precipice of being a Hall of Fame inside linebacker. Like he's that type of player, and so for him to retire before the age of 30 was shocking. But I'll present this as perhaps on the other side of that coin, with what we know about what professional football or football in general does to the human body, and with contracts paying out more and more money for these players. I think that we're going to start seeing more players retire early, whatever that means. Early is, it's up to them. I've often thought that retiring early is really is based on what we think and not what they think. And so you see these guys, and maybe they're just starting to take an assessment like, hey, you know what? I'm healthy now. I've made enough money so that I never have to work again in my life. Let me move on from this. Maybe NFL isn't my life. Maybe it is a job that I have and a vehicle for me to do something for the rest of my life. So I think that that's going to be an interesting storyline in the next coming years with what we know about the NFL with concussions and just generally what it does to the body and the money spiking. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look at moving forward.
Very good observation. I think that's something we'll definitely keep a track on. What about Seattle trading their starting center, Max Unger, to New Orleans for Jimmy Graham, one of the most athletic and most prolific tight ends in the NFL?
I mentioned that I lived in New Orleans for a little while earlier when I went to go see the NCAA tournament. So I made several friends down there and have a lot of them from Howard as well. And so I got a slew of text messages when Jimmy Graham got traded in terms of what are these guys doing. I mean, Jimmy Graham is one of the most prolific offensive talents that we've had in the league in a while. I think he's top 5 over his time in the NFL in terms of touchdown score. He's kind of what the prototypical tight end looks like in a lot of ways. Former basketball players. Really good height, really good size, really good hands, very nice speed. So he's always a matchup problem. If you put a linebacker on him, he's too fast for him. You put a safety on him, he's too big for that. Like there's no real good matchup for him. And so for him to get moved, I know he had a bit of a regression last year, and he had some. And last offseason, he had some issues with determining how he should be paid, with whether or not he should be paid like a tight end, or whether or not he should be paid like a wide receiver. And I think all that kind of had some of this to do with it, right? I think that after last offseason, there was a little bit of friction between he and management, and then you put that on top of his relative poor showing during the regular season. I think that they thought that made him more expendable. And then, to his credit, I know center isn't a sexy position, but Max Unger is a really, really good center in this league, multiple-time Pro Bowler. So they felt that they could fill a need in that area. And, again, we're talking about systems. So Sean Payton and Drew Brees together some of the most prolific offensive seasons that we've ever seen. So they're thinking, I'm assuming that their thinking is, we can win and we can score regardless of who we put into this system, that we're going to have enough talent to be able to put up the points, and that there are other areas that we need to work on. And one of the bigger things that they wanted to work on as they signed Mark Ingram to a 4-year, $16 million deal was balance, right? Like they picked up C.J. Spiller as in the running back. They got Mark Ingram back.
Yep.
They're going to want to be a more balanced team, and I think that'll make them a better. We saw it with Dallas. That makes you a better defensive team if you're able to run and keep your defense off the field and sustain drives and wear out the opposition's defense. It makes you a better team overall. Even with a passer like Drew Brees, if you're able to run the ball in a real manner, that affects the game in a way that even passing doesn't. And then on the other end of that trade, Russell Wilson gets his best toy that he's ever had in Jimmy Graham. He gets an absolute security blanket. Between he and Marshawn Lynch, you're starting to finally build weapons around Russell Wilson. And I think you'll see him. I also think you'll see Wilson get more and more passing, a more prolific offense, a more dangerous offense, as opposed to one that's more let's try not to defense in a bad position offense that they can get into sometimes. And keep this in mind too. This is a really, really deep wide receiver draft at the NFL level. In the NFL draft, there's a lot of wide receivers that are going to be coming out. So keep that in mind as your team maybe gets rid of a wide receiver or doesn't re-sign a guy. Like you looked at Andre Johnson, didn't get re-signed by the Texans. He got picked up by Indianapolis. Reggie Wayne got cut from Indianapolis. So you're seeing teams, maybe cutting some players in advance of the NFL draft as well, where they feel like they can fill some of these needs for cheaper.
Well, you know, and as you mentioned, Reggie Wayne getting cut, Indianapolis did a lot of stuff. Picked up Andre Johnson.
And Frank Gore. And one of the cool things about having Andrew Luck, in addition to having Andrew Luck and him being a really really talented quarterback, it's also a great advertisement. Like, yeah, wouldn't you like to play here? Like Frank Gore was all but signed to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then Indianapolis comes calling for virtually the same money. The money was, I think they offered him about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million more in guarantees, but the money was very very similar. But what Philadelphia couldn't offer was Andrew Luck, and a guy that you can absolutely count on. It was a lot more stable at the quarterback position. When you know you got a guy that can absolutely put up the points, Pep Hamilton, the offensive coordinator, Howard has done a really, really good job of balancing that team. Even running back, they've done a good job of being able to put up numbers. You've got Frank Gore, downhill runner, who's what they thought they were getting in Trent Richardson, and you've added Andre Johnson, who, in addition to being a really good possession receiver, is a very good blocker. I think you're going to see a lot more running out of the Indianapolis Colts moving forward.
Well, I'm never concerned with Indianapolis when it comes to offense. It's what happens on their defense that's going to make or break them. Because if they can shore up their defense, then I would say they're probably number 2 right behind New England. But until they do something defensively, I'm not
Yeah.
feeling them yet. Not feeling them yet. Just let's go back. Let's go to the Jets acquiring Brandon Marshall and also signing Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie.
Yeah, they brought they're trying to get the old band back together apparently with the Jets. They got their old corners back. It's interesting to me that the Darrelle Revis and his journey is really really interesting. He's one of the better free agents that we've ever had, right? Like we make a lot of comparisons to Dion in terms of on field, but he's got a little Dion in him off the field. In the fact that he'll go play for anybody and pretty much immediately makes them better, right? Because as much as we talk about defensive linemen and what they mean to a team, if you got a guy that you can always just throw on a wide receiver and just be like, okay, I don't have to worry about that wide receiver for the rest of the game, that's such a luxury to have, especially in this pass-happy offense that we find the NFL in right now. And then you add Cromartie, who to me has been one of the most underrated corners because he's pretty much always played on the other side of a really, really good corner. He's a 6'2" guy with really, really good speed as a quality athlete. You've suddenly started shrinking the field down in terms of what the opposition feels comfortable doing. And so the Jets, it's really hard to get a read on them, mostly because it's hard to get a read on their quarterback. And part of the reason that was difficult to get a read on their quarterback was because they didn't have anybody to throw the ball to. They didn't have any consistent presence on the offensive end in terms of skill position, offensive talent. They added Brandon Marshall, who I think that we can all agree that possession receivers, especially larger possession receivers, age better, right? Even if you're not running that 4.5 40 anymore, okay, but he's still 6'4". You're going to be 6'4" for the rest of your life. You're going to be 220 pounds for the rest of your life, and that's somebody that you, as a veteran wide receiver, you give to a young back, and that's going to make him. I think that just makes anybody better. I think a lot of fans are kind of over Geno, which really shows you. One, he's been up and down, short his career is nowadays. Like, quarterbacks used to be given a lot more time. They used to sit quarterbacks regardless of their position drafted. Now you draft them earlier and you play them pretty much as soon as you draft them. I don't know if that's necessarily the best for every quarterback. I know some quarterbacks, Cam Newton, Andrew, Russell Wilson, you could throw them right into the fire and they come out smelling like roses. I know that's the case for some quarterbacks, but I feel like some quarterbacks really could use that sitting down and watching them play. You look at Aaron Rodgers, and it's hard to tell exactly how important those years were behind Favre, but it's hard to believe that you can sit behind a guy and just not learn anything. There's a lot to the quarterback position, some of it on the field, some of it off the field, and it's hard to believe that quarterbacks just are completely ready to go out of the box as soon as they are drafted. And so if you have a guy like Jig, if you give him more time and give him more weapons, you might see something a little bit better moving forward.
I think one of the signings that sort of went under the radar, and I'm just taking a look here, is DeAngelo Williams getting signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, as a Carolina guy, I watched him. He and Jonathan Stewart were a fantastic tandem when healthy. That was pretty much the big thing with D'Angelo. D'Angelo's always been a really good running back. He was at Memphis. I think he put up a huge senior season, 2,000-yard senior season. He's always been very good running back. It's just, can he stay healthy? He's always had nicks here, nicks there. It wasn't even necessarily one big major injury. It was several smaller injuries that always kept him from being at his best. He finished the season pretty well, but that was in tandem with someone else. I'm assuming that he'll also be in a platoon system when he gets to the Steelers, as they already have their starting running back. But he'll be a nice change of pace running back, a guy you can bring in. He's a good pass blocker, good as a catcher, in addition to his being able to run just behind the line of scrimmage. I think that was a good pickup for them. Pittsburgh is known for just being able to get those running backs and get the most out of them.
Well, we'll probably start winding it down, but of course we can't mention without two individuals, especially. First of all, Mr. Sue goes to Miami for a ridiculous amount. I mean, quarterback money.
Yeah.
Like that. What do you think about that move?
It's a testament to how important the defensive line is. You look at J.J. Watt and the numbers getting, and you just know that you have a defensive tackle that can change the game. He's so close to the quarterback. We can talk a lot about a really, really good defensive end, right? Like if he's on the right side, we can roll to the left, or if he's on the left, we can roll to the right, or we can screen him, or we can chip him, and we can do a lot of different things. When you've got a presence up the middle that can not only stop the run up the middle, but also put pressure on the quarterback in the middle of the pocket in that A gap, well, suddenly that just changes everything. No quarterback, regardless of how well you scramble, regardless of how well you move within the pocket, no quarterback likes that pressure up the middle, and it changes everything. So that's why there's such a value on a guy like Sue, because he can do it on the run side and on the pass side. I mean, it's sad that he wasn't able to stay in Detroit, because I really like that team, but it's amazing that that Miami's invested that type of money in the defensive tackle position.
Well, and Detroit signing Nada from the Ravens to plug up that whole loss by Sue. So it should be going to be very interesting to see how both their careers go in their new teams. So what we'll do is we'll finish it up with Mr. DeMarco Murray. We're starting back. We're going back to where we started, the Philadelphia Eagles. So what are your thoughts about DeMarco saying goodbye to Dallas and hello, Eagles?
You know, it's funny. I think he ended up with 100-plus touches for Dallas Cowboys, and it was a source of pride for them all year, right? They talked about how tough he was. They talked about this. That's the indicative of this Dallas team, how tough they are. He got a hand injury, but he came back early from the hand surgery, and then that same number was used as they weren't giving him more money. Like 400 touches last year. Yes, I did have 400 touches because you gave me the ball 400 times. Like that's I always thought that was a very interesting dynamic that, yes, is a source of pride in one season, but in the offseason it's a fulcrum for why you're not going to get more money. I think that Philadelphia, once they saw LaShawn McCoy, once they traded LaShawn McCoy, and once they lost Frank Gore, I think they were in a position of, I'm not going to say panic, but they were aware that, hey, you know, we've changed a lot at this running back position, and if we don't get Frank Gore, which they didn't, well, now we're kind of in the wind a lot with what are we going to do with our running game? Because keep this in mind, as much as we talk about LaShawn McCoy being expendable, because they wanted a different type of running back. They didn't want an east-west running back. They wanted more a guy who's going to cut and make the one cut and then go. He was still really, really effective, and he was still one of the best running backs in the league. So if you don't get much from that, from a PR standpoint, if you don't get much from that running back position the next year, it makes you look really, really bad that you traded him. As good as Kiko Alonso, the linebacker that they traded him for, it's going to look really, really rough. So I think they looked at DeMarco Murray as a guy that, you know, maybe they can count on him for a large number of touches. Now, last year was pretty much the healthiest year he's had in the NFL. So is that indicative of him getting healthier as a year, or was that an aberration? Only time will tell. You know, it's kind of like with Darren McFadden and Ryan Matthews. Both guys recently signed. You know, are they going to be able to stay healthy? Because that's a tough position that if you're not healthy, you really can't help the team at all. So, you know, those guys we got to watch them moving forward, because DeMarco Murray wasn't even healthy in college. So like the fact that he's only had really one good season, one healthy season recently, and he still was able to sign to that kind of money, it was a little surprising, especially given that I thought with the LaShawn McCoy trade, they wanted to reduce the amount of money they were giving the running back.
Yeah, I think I did some reading up on it. I know that money comes into part of that. Kelly is basically definitely getting paying a little bit less in regards to salaries, and it'll be interesting. And Murray and Bradford have not had the greatest careers when it comes to health, so it'll be very interesting to see how long both of them, if both of them can make it through the season. And I'm sure it's going to be one heck of a game when Philadelphia hosts Dallas. When Dallas comes to play in Philadelphia, that'd be a game to get tickets for.
Absolutely, because they already don't like each other, and now that you added this additional storyline, it's going to be nasty. And I'm so glad we get it twice this year. It's great.
It's going to be quite a game, man. I mean, like, it's going to be very interesting but you know what? Something has to be said about Chip Kelly, because people may think he's crazy, but Belichick respects him, and Urban Meyer from the Ohio State Buckeyes respects him very much. Both of them have gone and went to see what his system's all about. So I may know a little bit about football, but I think people like Urban Meyer and Bill Belichick know a lot more than me. So if they're checking out what he's doing, I give Chip Kelly respect. It was going to be very interesting to see what goes on in the next year or two.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it exactly. Like, yeah, we can have all of our doubts that we want to, but he's kind of the mad scientist genius. And so you got to at least step back and at least give him this year and see what he comes out of the laboratory with.
Absolutely, because you look at when he started using his offense in the NFL, a lot of teams started copying it.
True, yeah, and I really want selfishly I want to see Mariota go to that team just because he's so comfortable in that system and he knows it so well that I would like to see it at its optimal level. I really want to see, can this thing really work in the NFL if it's running on all cylinders, if he got every single thing that he wanted, can this really, because we're talking about a revolution. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a revolution in the NFL in terms of what's important and in terms of how the game is played in its very fabric. That would be something very interesting to watch.
Well, Brenden, we're going to have to cut it there. And I know everyone who's watched the Sports Vibe, yes, it was a little bit longer of episode, A, because we haven't been on for a bit, and B, there's just so much going on. There's so many things we haven't even touched at that will hopefully come back in the next episode. And, yeah, they may have happened a little while back, but we still want to address them. So, Brenden, thanks again for joining us. How can people touch base with you?
Just hit me up on Twitter, WBHU alum. That's at WBHU alum. Or you can catch me from 9 to 11 on the Sports Shop Radio, just 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to thesportshopradio.com, click listen, or check me up on iTunes. He's the producer, I'm the host. It's a podcast I have. Check me out on any of those venues.
All right, good stuff. I'm Dr. Vibe. I'm your host and producer of this show, host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, host and co-producer of the Good Men Project Show, co-host and producer of the podcast for the President's Council on White House for the White House Council on Men and Boys. I think I got that right. I think I did. But you know what? Thanks so much. Thanks everyone so much for putting up. And sorry we couldn't get it going last time, but we figured out this time as always. You're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and let me say that again. You're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. As always, God bless. Peace be all. Keep the faith. Bye-bye. I'm so excited. I don't want to get off, but see you next time. Be well.